Hey guys, it's Chris. From a terrifying accident in the Swiss mountains to a deadly tangle with a power line, here are 10 horrifying examples of wingsuits going wrong. Number 10. Crash in the mountains. 34-year-old David Wall was an experienced thrill-seeking enthusiast. For years, he's been doing all kinds of extreme sports like skydiving, car racing, snowboarding. He was also super into motorcycles. The Utah native had been living in Europe for the last couple years, but in September of 2020, his high-octane life would get the better of him. He was in the Churfürsten mountain range in Switzerland on a wingsuiting adventure. Yeah, but we probably need to clear up what exactly is a wingsuit. The typical wingsuit design has webbed wing surfaces between the arms and legs. The force of the opposing air inflates those webs by pushing air through inlets in the suit, supporting and keeping the airfoil semi-rigid throughout the flight or jump. Essentially, you're supposed to be able to glide through the air just like a bird. Wall jumped from the highest spot within a cluster of peaks at an elevation of 7,566 feet. This is an insanely high spot even for an extreme sport like this. He crashed into the side of a mountain and he never got back up. Number 9. Deadly accident in Brazil. Another recent wingsuit failure happened in Brazil in 2021. A Moroccan-American man traveled to the mountain of Pedra da Gávea near Rio de Janeiro to fly just like a bird. He set off to climb to the top of the great mountain to spread his wings. He took the leap, and nobody ever saw where he landed. Authorities had to be called in to search for the guy's body. He was found 2 hours later. Not much was left of him, as most of him was splattered. And it's not clear exactly what went wrong with his flight, though initial reports suggested his parachute simply didn't open. Nobody actually saw him crash, as this guy was more of a lone wolf when it came to extreme sports, which, by the way, it's really not a great idea. He was definitely dead upon arrival. The 42-year-old was a resident of North Carolina, and had worked at the American Bank for over 20 years. He will be sadly missed. Wingsuits are no joke, and one wrong move can spell disaster. Statistics show that 72% of wingsuit jumpers have witnessed serious injury or death of other participants in the sport, and 43% of them have suffered a significant injury from a base jump. And 76 had experienced at least one near-miss incident, where a serious injury or fatality was avoided through sheer luck. Number 8. Jet-powered fail. A man from France named Vincent Raffet got into a bit of an accident with a jet-powered wingsuit, though actually the device was less of a wingsuit and kind of more of a jetpack, and the accident was less of an accident and more of a death. The tragic incident happened in Dubai during a training exercise. You see, Vince was a professional jetpack pilot, a trained athlete, and he was already famous online for posting viral videos of his amazing jetpack stunts. Vince was also the first jetpack pilot to attempt high-altitude flight using a jet-powered wingsuit, like a super primitive version of Iron Man's suit. Even though other pilots had jumped from helicopters wearing jetpacks, Vince was the first to launch from the ground and soar upwards into the atmosphere. But what went wrong this time? The suit is powered by 4 miniature jet engines. The controls allow a pilot to move in any direction they want to maneuver and to perform rolls and loops. And the suit has a maximum altitude of 20,000 feet. The maximum duration is 13 minutes, and the top speed is 253 miles per hour. Vince should have been totally fine, but unfortunately, he didn't use his emergency parachute while descending and plummeted to his death. Number 7. Death of a champ. Dr. Angelo Grabisic from Willenhall in the UK recently perished while flying a wingsuit in Saudi Arabia. The tragic incident has been described as a misadventure by local news. Grabisic was a talented astronautical engineer and the leader of a wingsuit design team at the University of Southampton. He was known for working on propulsion systems for spacecraft. He had helped initiate the Icarus project, a plot to design better, safer, and faster wingsuits. And he was a kind and honest person loved by his students, his family, and his friends. But unfortunately, something went horribly wrong with his final flight. At first, everything seemed to be going fine. He jumped out of the helicopter and was gliding through the air perfectly. But then something happened. He was flying too low. He misjudged the height of a ridge and he crashed. He then tumbled the rest of the way to the ground, suffering such severe injuries that by the time paramedics got to him, it was too late. So what do you think so far? Would you ever want to try wingsuit flying? I don't think I would, but you let me know in the comments below. And if you're liking this video, then be sure to hit that thumbs up and the subscribe buttons if you haven't already. And now, more wingsuit disasters. Number 6. A deadly competition. As if wingsuits weren't dangerous enough on their own, there are actually wingsuit diving competitions in which people race wearing these crazy suits. You have to be a little mad to get into this sport, and according to Newsweek, a veteran skydiver was recently competing in one of these insane races when he tragically crashed and died. His name was Dmitry Didenko, and he was competing in the Wingsuit Diving Championships in Western Australia. Dmitry jumped out of an aircraft and lost the race almost immediately. His parachute never deployed, and he literally tumbled all the way to the ground and died on impact. Well, he may have been alive for a few seconds or minutes, but he was definitely dead by the time they scraped his body off the ground. And it was all because of a failed parachute. According to WA Today, about 20 people, including friends, witnessed Didenko's jump go awry while skydivers on the ground tried desperately to save him. Tributes poured in like rain for the adrenaline junkie as friends and fellow skydivers remembered Didenko as an amazing friend and soulful adventurer. A fellow skydiver, MG Franco, wrote over Instagram, "Fly high, we'll miss your amazing madness." This really proves how horrifyingly dangerous wingsuits are, and just how risky this all is. You have to have nerves of steel to do stuff like this. And Dmitry had gone over 6,000 jumps all around the world throughout his thrill-seeking life. He was a legendary skydiver, but it was strapping into a wingsuit that finally ended his career and killed him. He was only 30 years old and still had a long life to live, but then again, when you live dangerously close to the edge, sometimes you slip. Or in this case, when you jump off of something or out of something really high, trying to fly like you were born with wings, the landing might not go so well. Number 5, the desperate warning. Some of the extra risks that come with wingsuiting are flat spins, aka uncontrollable spinning; burble, meaning a vortex in the parachute deployment area; tail strikes, meaning hitting an aircraft's tail on exit; and twists, meaning a spinning parachute. The need to control a suit during a malfunction, such as having to depressurize inflated wings prior to opening a parachute, can result in the most serious of injuries and death. And sometimes the parachute just doesn't open. Statistics say that 1 in 1,000 parachutes will fail to open. A tourist from Beijing was missing for 7 days before her body was finally discovered, deep in the forests of Tianmen Mountain National Park, after a horrifying wingsuit accident that went horribly wrong. The unidentified victim and a cameraman jumped from over 8,000 feet above the scenic area in central China, but there were problems almost immediately. The woman strayed from the proper route and rapidly descended towards the trees. The cameraman tried desperately to warn her. He waved and screamed, but she simply never took notice. She was deviating significantly from the agreed flight path, and then she was gone. She vanished from sight and fell into the trees, and it's believed that her parachute never opened. This means she fell 8,000 feet and never slowed down for a second until she smacked into the ground. The reason her body was so difficult to find is because the area in which she fell was vast, dark, and almost completely inaccessible. Search teams, helicopters, drones scoured the area for 7 days before they finally found the poor traveler. Suffice it to say, she was in pretty dire condition when they finally discovered her broken, doll-like body. Number 4, into the power lines. A Russian man in a wingsuit leapt off an Italian cliff and landed in some power lines. Talk about a shocking turn of events. The guy died in what has been described as a horrific accident after being electrocuted to death. The incident happened in Shimakapi, a popular destination with tourists that overlooks Lake Garda. The Russian's wingsuit was stranded inflatable fabric with specialized arms and legs that provide lift. But the lift provided by his suit took him directly into a mess of power lines, at which point he was delivered a fatal dose of electricity. According to a local police officer, he had probably misjudged where he was jumping from, and that's what cost him his life. The same officer also said he was electrocuted instantaneously when he hit the power lines. Wingsuit accidents have become so commonplace in Italy that the local rescuers charged with retrieving the dead bodies actually went on protest to try and stop the sport from taking place. Nevertheless, people are still jumping. And this is despite around 74 confirmed deaths involving wingsuits in just the last 3 years. So what do you think? Should this sport be banned? Or are you more of the opinion that it's their life, and if they want to take that leap of faith, then let them? Number 3, the last jump. Extreme athlete Dean Potter has died in a tragic wingsuit accident. This guy was famous for his crazy cliff climbs and his horrifying, death-defying extreme jumps. He was one of 2 men killed after leaping from 7,500 feet in Yosemite National Park. Dean and his jumping partner went missing shortly after going up the mountain. Park rangers searched for them overnight, but to no avail. It wasn't until the next morning that a helicopter crew spotted both their bodies deep in Yosemite Valley. The men were still wearing their wingsuits, but it didn't appear as if their parachutes had deployed. As you can probably tell by now if you've watched this entire video, parachutes not deploying seems to be the main cause of death in wingsuit accidents. It's almost like these things need a complete redesign, because the parachutes simply don't deploy when they're supposed to. The athlete knew the risks every time he decided to fly off a cliff with a parachute. He even lost a friend just a year before to a base jumping accident and spoke at that friend's memorial service. A fellow climber, Chris McNamara, said he always recognized how dangerous the sport was and at the same time how magical it was. The tension between those two things. But here's why Dean Potter and his partner had gone jumping solo without telling anyone. It's actually illegal to do this in national parks, and so the guys probably went at dusk or even during the night so they didn't get caught. Well, this was the last jump they ever attempted, as they both plummeted to the bottom of the valley and came face to face with death. Number 2, saved by trees. Base jumper Eric Dos Santos from San Diego was left broken after a terrifying wingsuit accident that was all caught on his helmet camera. He was flying in his wingsuit at 90 miles per hour in France when he misjudged where the top of the trees were. He didn't pull up enough and he ended up clipping the top of a tree, and the mistake sent him spinning down to the forest floor, where he smacked the ground extremely hard and blacked out. Eric woke up in a hospital sometime later and found out he had spent 3 hours laying crippled on the forest floor until trail workers eventually found him. This is one of those rare cases where base jumping gone wrong didn't actually result in a death. The incident left him with several broken bones, but he walked away with his life. He fractured his scapula, his clavicle, 3 left ribs, and he suffered head trauma and deep lacerations. But in all seriousness, he should have died, and it's actually beyond super lucky he's still alive. Number 1, FACEPLANT into a mountain. Jeb Corliss has been base jumping for around 20 years. He also had an extensive career using wingsuits. In 2012, Jeb jumped from the Table Mountain in South Africa, an altitude of 3,558 feet. He flew downwards at 120 miles per hour. And during the flight, his foot touched a boulder and sent him crashing into the side of the mountain. But he was miraculously able to pull his parachute even after doing a faceplant. And it was thanks to his parachute that he had a much gentler time falling down to the bottom of the mountain, where he was found alive but in very dire condition. He had 2 broken legs and a torn ACL and needed reconstructive surgeries. He spent over a year in hospital in South Africa. Despite this horrible episode of wingsuit diving gone wrong, Jeb got right back on the horse after being discharged from the hospital and jumped on live television in 2013 in China, sailing through a dangerous V-shaped slot about 15 feet wide. It was a daredevil move, but he did it anyways, and he survived. Thanks for watching. Would you ever consider trying a wingsuit, or do you think it's totally nuts? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you haven't already, and then come back again for another gut-wrenching video. We'll see you next time.